All right, let's just jump right in. We spend so much of our time trying to figure out why people do the things they do, right? At work, in our families, even with ourselves. But what if our entire approach, the very way we think about human action, is just wrong? What if we've been starting in completely the wrong place this whole time?
This is the core idea we're going to unpack. And I know it's a really bold claim. It goes against pretty much everything we're taught. But stick with me here, because this one little shift in perspective might honestly change how you see, well, everything. So first, let's talk about what I like to call the behavior trap. This is our default setting, It's the intuitive, logical way we all try to make sense of the world. But as you're about to see, it's also incredibly misleading. I mean, this is our standard playbook, isn't it? We see a behavior, someone's procrastinating or they snap under pressure, and our brain immediately tries to diagnose their inner state. We figure it must be about their motivation or their beliefs, or maybe we even judge their character. And we assume, hey, if we just find the right little button to push, we can change that behavior directly. It just feels so obvious, mostly because behavior is the only part we can actually see.
But here it is. This is the critical question that flips the whole game on its head. What if all that stuff we see, all that behavior, what if it's not the start of the story? What if it's actually the very last page? So check this out. This completely reverses our usual model. Just look at where behavior is. It's way up at the end, step 4. It is the last thing to happen. Long before any action becomes visible, some kind of load enters the system, it gets spread out across its internal architecture, and then the system has to compensate for it. The behavior that we finally see is just the end result of this whole invisible internal process. And this analogy just nails it, doesn't it? If a door is swinging wildly, you don't blame the door's motivation or its character. That would be absurd. You look for a draft, you look for an open window, you might even check the building's foundation to see if something's off. Behavior is just that swinging door. It's a symptom, never the root cause.
So, what's the big deal? What's the harm in getting this wrong? Well, the price of this misdiagnosis is actually incredibly high. It leads to so much frustration, so much wasted effort, and just this endless cycle of failure. And this is how it usually plays out. It happens in 3 stages. First up is misattribution. We blame things like a lack of willpower. But here's the catch. Doing that just adds more load to a system that's already struggling. So then comes friction. We try to force a different outcome to just override the behavior, but the system, naturally, pushes back to protect itself, and that finally leads to instability. Even if we somehow manage to change the behavior for a minute, it never sticks because the underlying structure that produced it is still there, completely unchanged. Okay, so if behavior is just the symptom, what's the cause? To get there, we have to look underneath the surface at the first of 2 really crucial ideas: architecture. This is the true governing layer of how we think.
And architecture isn't just some vague metaphor. It's the real, stable, underlying properties of your mind. You can think of it like the wiring, the pathways, the very design that dictates how you handle information and pressure. It's the actual foundation of that building we were just talking about.
And this architecture is made up of real, definable things. For instance, topology. That's just about the shape of your mental pathways. Some are like wide, easy-to-travel highways, and others are more like winding country roads. Or stabilization rules. Those are the automatic ways your system protects itself when it's under pressure, kind of like a circuit breaker in your house. These things are always there, operating in the background, long before any specific behavior ever shows up.
But architecture by itself doesn't create behavior. It needs a force to act on it. And that brings us to the second piece of the puzzle. The variable that is almost always completely ignored, load.
Now, this next point is absolutely crucial. Load is not what you feel. It's not stress, it's not an emotion, it's the objective structural demand being placed on your cognitive architecture. Think about the wind in the building again. The building doesn't feel the wind, it just experiences a structural force. That's load.
So what does this look like in the real world? Well, load is things like ambiguity, when you just don't have a clear path forward. It's complexity. It's feeling pressure to be a certain way. It's tight deadlines, or even just trying to hold 2 contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. All of these things put a real structural demand on your system.
And here's what happens when that load cranks up. You can see the difference, right? On the left, under low load, your cognitive pathways are open, you're flexible, you're creative. But on the right, as load increases, your system goes into protection mode. It starts to narrow your options and activate its default safety protocols. Your behavior becomes more rigid, more simple, more reactive. The key is, the person didn't change, the conditions acting on their architecture did.
So bringing this all together, what does this actually mean for us day to day? It means we have to start asking a fundamentally different, and frankly, a much more powerful question.
The old behavioral model always asks, why? It's a question that looks for a reason, a motivation, often a fault. But the structural question is so much more useful. It asks, what is it about the architecture and the load right now that makes this behavior the only structurally possible option? See the difference? It's not about reasons anymore. It's about constraints.
And this is a really profound shift. It moves us out of a place of blame and judgment, of trying to control an outcome, and into a place of curiosity and, frankly, compassion. Your responsibility is no longer to wrestle your behavior into submission, but simply to understand the structure that's producing it.
And that right there brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. Once you stop chasing the why of a behavior, and you start to see the underlying architecture and the load acting on it, the behavior isn't a mystery anymore. It's not confusing. It just becomes readable. It explains itself. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Think about a recurring behavior, maybe in yourself, maybe in someone else, that has always frustrated or confused you. Now, looking at it through this new lens, through the lens of architecture and load, how might you see it differently?